Hello everyone, welcome to this edition of On Deck with Mercury. I'm Vienna Town Manager Mercury Payton. Our topic for August is the town's tree canopy and beautification efforts in our commercial corridor. Joining me this evening for this discussion here at Glendon Park, our Park Maintenance Superintendent, Jeremy Edwards. Hi Jeremy, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
And also our town urban arborist, Scott Diffendorfer. How are you, Scott?
I'm great, how are you?
Good to see you as
Good to
always.
be here. Thank you.
So what better place to talk about trees than in the middle of one of the town's most beautiful parks here, Glendon Park. Vienna has a history of trees in wood, lots, and field edges. As the town developed from farmland and transitioned into residential communities like we have here now, trees were planted as amenities. And by 2011, Vienna's town cover was more than about 44%. I got that number from you. That percentage has declined considerably since then. So maybe, Jeremy, you could tell us why that is the case.
No, thank you, Mercury.
Yeah.
So as you drive around Vienna, you'll see a lot of new residential developments. With those developments, there's a tremendous amount of tree loss. Scott, to my left here, Scott works with a lot of developers to try to retain as many trees as possible, but not every tree, unfortunately, can be retained. So that's one of the reasons. Tree maintenance is another. Changing environmental impacts. 2019, the wettest year in recorded history. Every summer, it seems like we're getting hotter and hotter. So there's quite a number of factors why trees are in decline.
Sure. So residential growth is one factor, as you mentioned, but it's not the only factor, is it? I mean, there are probably other challenges on public lands. What do you think?
So on public lands, one of the things that we would like to do more of is plant trees. We'd like to plant more trees in our parks, essentially planting the next generation of trees. We do have a lot of heavy deer pressure, as most of the residential homeowners are well aware of in town, but those deer are also in our parks. And so if you look through our parks and the understory, you don't see a lot of new tree seedlings. So we are ramping up efforts through our habitat restoration program at Glendon Park, at Southside Park, and also at Wildwood Park to install more trees, protect them, and plant the next generation of trees. We're also looking to plant more trees along streets as well.
Good. So we understand the problem, and the Vienna Town Council has made trees and tree canopy a priority for the foreseeable future. And the council approved the tree canopy assessment, which you had a big role in that. And that report offers some very important details. So maybe share some of those.
Yeah. So what it was a top-down approach to tree canopy assessment. So the aerial imagery was used. Scott worked with our vendor on that. It was Davey Tree Resources. So they established that currently, or actually in 2021, there was 38.7% tree canopy within town. That was a reduction from the 44% in 2011. And then also in 1990, it was actually even less than the 44. So we headed up a trajectory, and now we're heading down. And what's also coincided with downward trajectory is a lot more residential development.
So the tree assessment was important in helping inform the town's goals for improving the tree canopy. So now what? So what are the next steps?
So we were working with council all this last winter and spring, trying to educate council with the help of the reports to educate them about where we're at and where we'd like to go. So where we'd like to go is planting as many trees or influencing as much as we possibly can on town-owned property, and then also looking what we can do on private property. And to that end, the state, Dillon Rural State, we get guidance from the state. They set the regulatory authority on how much tree canopy is required. So currently the town has a replacement code, 20%. After 20 years, 20% tree canopy coverage is required. We'd like to go with the same or an improvement of that to a conservation code. Conservation code will allow us to increase some of the residential zonings to 25% coverage after 20 years, and also allow us to recommend and require more conservation of trees during development.
Now when you say conservation code, you're talking about just updating the code to include conservation aspects, or is it something different?
It's adopting a section of state code that allows more for conservation. Essentially covers the same as what we have now, but allows for not just simply the replacement, but requirement to replace, conserve some of the trees.
Got it. Now, Scott, as the town's urban arborist, you'll be heavily involved in achieving many of these goals, and others on public and private lands. So maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. On a daily basis, I'm out there pretty much on the front line with this. And we talked earlier about the building and the development pressures on our tree population. And I have, in the last 2 years, I've seen a greater involvement from the builders to support what we're trying to do.
Right.
But the bottom line is, trees still sometimes have to come down because people want to build a house where there's a tree, obviously. What we're trying to do is twofold. We want to obviously enforce the canopy requirement, but also what we're trying also to do is to maintain some of the existing mature canopy where it makes sense to do that. And you know, I think I'm seeing plans come through now where there's some thought given to that. I didn't used to see that, and now I am beginning to see a little more concern towards preservation. So to me, that is one of the big things. And we have a lot of pressure on the trees. You know, there's projects. You know, the sidewalks are a good thing, but you know, we have the trees to deal with there. We have infrastructure improvements all the time. There's always a new project somewhere that requires a close look at the tree population, and we have tree inventories done for every project that is done. So I can really dig down into that and establish some sort of management priorities when it's possible to do that. And additionally, as we're developing all this information, gathering all these data points that we've managed to get in the last year, we're going to use that to develop an urban tree forestry management plan for the town. So that's kind of a much wider range, or broader ranged look at everything. Whereas the canopy coverage was specific, the tree inventory was specific. This is going to take those things and meld them together and develop a guideline, if you will, for maybe 5 years. You know, like a 5-year plan. It will be renewed in 5 years, along with an update of our inventory and an update of our canopy coverage. You know, it's just an ongoing process. None of this is static. This is an ever-changing thing, and we have data for today, but we could have a major storm come through and lose trees or something, and it would all be different tomorrow. So it's an ever-evolving process, and there's some challenges to go with that. But you know, that's why I'm here. That's what I like to do.
And the urban tree forestry management plan, I think you mentioned, is that an internal document only, or is that something that, let's say someone wants to develop in town and they want to take a look at that? Is it only for internal use?
Absolutely
or is
not.
It,
no, it's a public document, and we want it to be. I encourage public involvement, and when people call me, I'm so like, I want to talk to you about the trees before we start building, and I don't get that call very often. But when I do, I want that, because it's much easier to do planning and design and understand what's involved with a project when I get in the front end of it. So this is going to be another way to do that.
Sure.
So I would like to think anything we do is public. It's going to eventually end up on the web, and people can look at those documents. They can call me. People call me all the time. Send them a copy. So yes, indeed, that will be absolutely part of the process.
Sure.
Yeah.
Chairman, anything you'd like to add?
I think just we'd like to. I mean, the goal is, as Scott mentioned, to constantly monitor. Things are constantly changing. Conditions changing, tree canopy is changing. So we'd like to reassess approximately every 5 years to see to determine the trajectory that we're heading in. That would be the best way forward.
One of my initiatives this summer soon, I hope, we're going to start analyzing tree canopy prior to capturing all this data. Which means we physically have to go in, pull a set of plans, look at the set of plans, and measure how much canopy was there, and actually do the manual calculations, just to see where that property was, let's say 10 years ago, and go out today and look at it and actually measure, well, how much canopy do we actually gain as a result of what was done 10 years ago? So I'm not sure what that's going to lead to, but I'm thinking it's going to give us an idea of what our growth curve is.
Right.
Because that's an important thing. We want to project future growth. We want to project future activities. You know, it's good to know that.
And measure that growth.
And measure that growth.
Right,
Absolutely.
right.
Yep.
Well, it also helps us to understand if our current code and policies are effective. And really just, I mean, we need to, assess the status quo and make sure it's achieving what we want to achieve as a town.
Sure, sure. And these goals are very ambitious, absolutely. Another piece of this plan involves a recently completed tree inventory on public property, such as on right-of-ways along streets and parks. So what did that show us? What did that reveal?
We have a lot of trees, Mercury.
I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah, we have over 7,200 trees.
Sure.
The process for the inventory is we assessed all of the town's trees along streets. And now we also assess most of our parks. We still have yet to go into a couple of our conservation parks and really assess the centers of those parks. We focused along the edges where where the interface with other private property, where other residents would be most concerned about town's trees and the impact to their property. So we have over 7,200 trees. 65% of those need some sort of maintenance. That's a lot of trees that need maintenance. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. I would say probably 10 years worth. But we also have a lot of available space to plant more trees as well, which affects the canopy coverage. And it's the full cycle. We know some trees need to come down, but what can we do to ensure that there is a continual population of varying age?
Right.
We don't want all of our trees old. We don't want them all young. We want a good mix of young, middle-aged, and mature trees.
Sure, sure. Now you delivered a great presentation to the council on these findings in May and these goals, and the council was impressed with these things and receptive to the idea. Does the tree canopy decline take place over more than a decade, and will it take more time to restore it? What are your thoughts about that? I think we're off to a great start, but do you have any observations?
Excuse me. I think if you were to put it on a graph, I think and this is just my gut instinct, I guess you'll say, but I think we've actually started to stop the decline. I don't know that we're coming back up yet, but I think we're at a point where we can start effectively changing that trend. We have a lot of work to do, but we have a lot of support from council to do it. And namely, right now, it's planting trees. We have great support for that.
Right.
And that's going to
be
be
top 4 priorities for the
exactly. And there's going to be a lot of that going on at the end of the year once it gets cool and not so hot and a little more rain and that sort of thing. There'll be a significant impact on that. So it's back to that question: is what's the curve? What is the effect if we plant a tree today? What's that tree going to mean in 10 or 20 years?
Right.
We give values to that for canopy credit calculations, but they're just the best guess. Every tree grows differently, and I have a feeling that once these trees that were planted 10 years ago or 15 years ago, they're going to become a bigger part of the canopy, and the next survey is going to pick up on trees that maybe didn't get picked up this time.
That's good.
So yeah, I think that the numbers may work in our favor at that point. And we have a 39% canopy, 39.8% canopy coverage, and that's not terrible. It's average.
Sure.
Vienna's not an average town, so we shouldn't have an average. We shouldn't have an average canopy, right?
Right.
Maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Well, I know my core where I live, there's a lot of trees on my.
Well, there's certain there's pockets of town that are really well treed.
Yeah.
There's other pockets where it's not, and that's what we got to do. We got to identify that stuff and start working towards making it a more equitable spread of tree canopy. So everybody has street trees. So it's really important.
And before I leave this topic, anything that you all want to add, maybe for the viewers who are watching, anything that you think is left unsaid that's good for them to know?
So just to add, council did approve $250,000 to plant trees in the town's rights of way. Specifically rights of way, that was very important to the council. And so this fall we are going to start the process of installing those. we hope that $250,000 should yield about 500 trees along our street. So hopefully this fall we'll have about half of those installed, and then in the fall of '24 we'll plant the other half.
Now, and is fall the best time to plant those?
Correct, yeah. Fall actually helps us as staff because it's less watering, it's cooler, there's more natural rainfall, and so we don't have to spend as much time out there watering them. It also gives them 2 seasons to acclimate. So you have the fall, winter, and actually spring, so 3 seasons to establish a root system before it gets super hot in the summer, and then have potential drought stress. So that's ideal time for us.
Got it. And so, so you have the planting in the falls, fall season for that. Now, also the $250,000 you're talking about, does that take into account the trees that you know you have to kind of, the ones that are dying and you have to kind of deal with those? Is a replacement tree, or is it separate?
That money was specifically allocated for tree planting and establishment.
Right.
So it'll be the purchase, installation of those trees, and also the maintenance, specifically watering of those trees to get them established. We have separate budget.
A separate budget
for maintenance.
For maintenance, and you know, so when it comes to all that goes into maintenance of the trees that are existing, separate budget for that.
Correct.
And then $250,000 is for brand new trees.
Correct, yes,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. In addition to the money allocated by Town Council, Maud Robinson Trust has
That's right,
also
yeah.
specifically donated $50,000 to plant trees in town. So,
And you already know where they're going to go, don't you?
we've identified 4 streets that we would like to install those, but we'd also like to install those trees along East Creek Trail. That's is a riparian corridor that has quite a lot of tree mortality in the last 5 years. So we're looking to reestablish riparian planting, which includes trees and shrubs there, and that is something we hope to gain approval from the trust to install. So that as well we would start on this fall.
Okay, so. Excellent, excellent. Well, speaking of this fall, we'll transition to the next topic here, and that's the Maple Avenue and Church Street streetscape that's taking place. So maybe tell us about this is a project a lot of people have been looking forward to. Tell us about all that goes into that, and I know we're going to get that underway here this fall.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very important topic and a very visual topic. So, so we've the town has hired a architectural firm, LSG. So they're working with us and council to essentially design a new streetscape scheme.
Sure.
So we're trying to retain most of the trees along Maple Avenue and also Church Street. So specifically on Maple Avenue, we are planting from East Street all the way through to Lawyers Courthouse intersection. Church Street will be Mill Street through to Lawyers Road. So that's the scope of the work. There's quite a lot of planters. There's well over 150 trees on both streets. So we are going to remove some trees. We're removing 51 trees as part of this project, but we're also trying to install 51 trees as part of this project. Some trees are just not in poor condition and would have to be removed regardless of the project. And then also to strategically place those trees in areas that need more canopy, and some trees just are covering some of the businesses or they're too dense. And so we're trying to be strategic about which trees we replace. So that's the trees, but the brunt of this project is surrounds beautification. Right. Improving the visual appearance of all of these streetscape planters. So the ground cover layer, the shrub layer will be what's most visible and what will essentially lead us to a successful program installation. So we're in design phase right now. We hope to gain approval from council on September 11th to move forward with implementation, and then we hope that implementation would happen shortly thereafter.
Got it, got it.
And hopefully successfully complete the project by Thanksgiving.
Excellent. Now, when's the last time that the town, I don't know if you know, has gone something like this? It hasn't.
It's been
many years.
20 plus years.
20 plus years.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think Maple Avenue was developed in phases. I believe there were 3 phases. and then Church Street was another phase
Right.
after Maple was established.
Now, your estimation, should it be every 20 years we do something like this, or is there an ongoing, in your mind, strategy with regard to the upkeep after this is installed in the fall? It's installed. Is there some kind of strategy as far as upkeep and?
Well, a lot of the success surrounds water. So, plants need water.
Right,
It's
right.
not new science.
Yeah.
And so Maple Avenue fortunately has an irrigation system.
Oh, okay.
So it'll help establish the plants there. The plants will be both acclimated towards sun and shade, some for both. And allow and take into consideration that the trees will grow larger there and create more shade. So yeah, and Church Street does not have irrigation currently, so we're discussing with council what's the best way to approach that street to achieve the goals of beautification there.
Right.
Church Street is a little bit more established, and so we're looking to supplement rather than kind of clean the whole slate and start over again.
Right.
Maple will essentially retain most of the trees, but everything else is going. And then everything, all new trees plus the shrub layer, ground cover layer will be reestablished. To get back to your question, success will be determined on establishment and then also ongoing maintenance. So we are hopeful that with just ongoing maintenance, replacing plants as they either get shaded out or there's too much impact from road salts or dogs frequenting those areas. We'll replace those as need be. So the goal is hopefully to keep up with the maintenance rather than to do get to a point where in 20 years we're like, oh my gosh, we need to replace the whole thing again.
Right, right. Now, speaking of Maple Avenue and this project and the time of the year, you said by Thanksgiving. Well, there's an event, Halloween parade, it's right down Maple Avenue, right at the heart of all of this. And then Church Street Stroll is right after that. I know you've got a strategy how to protect these plantings and all this. Maybe share just maybe just a quick overview. Maybe not a deep dive, but a quick overview of how you plan on protecting these new plantings.
Sure. So yes, the Halloween parade along Maple Avenue from Branch Road down to Center Street is quite impactful. People come to see the parade. It's very successful. Good problem to have. But it's also not kind to the plants that are in the streetscape planters. That is where most people stand or sit. And if they don't stand or sit in them, they're sitting next to them and walk through the planters. So we're hoping to stage the implementation of the plants to coincide not during festival time. So the parade will hopefully have the least impact on the trees and new plants. So in order to really prevent people from getting into the planters, we may have to fence them off.
Okay.
To ensure that they survive. But we're hoping best case scenario, we will have no plants installed in that stretch of road in leading up to the parade. So fingers crossed. It's a lot of extra work to fence off the plantings, but success of the plantings is important, and we don't want essentially a 2-hour parade to, have to replace hundreds of thousands of dollars in plants. That's no one wins.
That's not the goal.
Yes, yeah.
So you certainly have your work cut out for you, and I'm sure that this will all be very successful. Thank you both for joining me today. Before we end, I know we just talked about the plantings, but again, I'll ask, on the tree part and here on the plantings on Maple Avenue and the beautification of that, anything that you want to wrap up with? What's important? I'll start with, I know you just finished talking, so Scotty, anything that you would like to mention that you think is good for people to know?
I think I'll close with the statement that everybody notices when a tree is removed, right? But they don't notice if one's saved. And I say that because I almost tell you just by the way my phone rings if a tree has been removed somewhere, because I get a lot of phone calls, and I actually like that, because I'm glad that people. This is a very tree conscientious community. People love the trees in this town, And I would just say, keep that in mind. But yeah, I want to know if you're upset about a tree, because that's the ammunition for me when I go to the site or the developer and say, look, I'm getting calls about this tree. We really got to do something about it. And we've done that. We've saved some trees because there was an outcry. Sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes you just can't do it. But boy, it's nice to know that I have that support. It makes me feel comfortable and confident when I have that conversation. I'm not out there alone,
Right.
So, but yeah, it's great. I mean, it's overall, this is a very blessed community for the trees that it has, and it's blessed that we're able to try to take care of it as best we can too. So yeah, it's all good.
And you, Jeremy?
I just want to, Vienna's a great place to live. Vienna's a great place to work. Trees help, they're the infrastructure that helps frame the rest of our community. So try and sometimes put a tangible benefit on them. You don't really know it until it's gone. And so I think it's important to have a good framework of trees throughout town. I think Vienna's done a good job of that in the past to establish where, more walkable communities. Think of today, it's 90+ degrees.
It certainly is.
We're sitting in the shade of trees here, and that's rather important. No one looks for the sun usually on 90+ degree afternoons. So the green infrastructure is vital. It's very important to the town, we know that. And I'm glad that Town Council and the residents are investing in the future of Vienna.
Sure.
Yep.
Well, thank you both. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy, for
My pleasure.
joining us. And
Glad to be here.
thank you, everyone, for tuning in this time for this edition of On Deck with Mercury. And I hope everyone enjoys this very, very hot summer. And we'll see you with the next edition of On Deck with Mercury. Thank you very much.